Let's now turn to George Topalidis. Hello, George. I'm going to
Hello.
introduce you, and you can start your presentation as well. George Topalidis holds degrees from Southern Connecticut State University in History and from the University of Connecticut in Microbiology. His research interests are framed within the field of historical sociology and include contested racial identities, U.S. immigration law, and social memory. He is currently a PhD candidate in the Department of Sociology and Criminology and Law at the University of Florida and is the founder and project coordinator of the Ottoman Greeks of the United States project at the University of Florida Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Gregory. I'd first like to say that I'd like to thank the organizing committee for giving all of us the opportunity here to speak and present our research on just doing a wonderful job in organizing the whole weekend for our viewers. And I'd like to actually begin by briefly introducing myself a little bit further beyond the bios, the official bios that we present as part of our academic work, because I believe that that aspect of my identity is particularly salient in understanding the Ottoman Greeks of the United States project that I'm going to present for you today. It is very much linked to the project itself. That's the way I feel, at least in pursuing the work and having established the project now 5 years ongoing at the University of Florida, at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, with the help of the wonderful folks at the UF's Digital Collections Libraries, the Center for Greek Studies, and the Center for European Studies. Their help has been invaluable in taking an idea that was just in my head only 5 years ago and really bringing it to fruition and making it a reality that is shareable and accessible for all. So first and foremost, I am a first-generation immigrant to the United States. I was born in Athens, Greece. I am a second-generation immigrant to Greece itself. My parents were of that generation that they immigrated to Greece as refugees at the end of the Ottoman period. They were some of my families, both sides of my family, were some of the last to leave from northeastern Asia Minor, the region known as Pontos today, and they arrived in different areas of Greece and assimilated in those areas in northern Greece, my father's side, in southern Greece, in the slums of Piraeus and Drapetsona for my mother's family. And I was born in Athens as a result. When we decided to move to the United States, that immigration experience very much impacted me personally. And the stories that my family members told influenced and impacted me as a child, as a teenager. It was just the topic of conversation. What happened in Asia Minor, what happened in Eastern Thrace, what happened to the islanders of Marmara, and Imbros and Tenedos. All of these stories, were just the topic of conversation almost on a daily basis in my home. And for me, it was just, common knowledge. And it wasn't until I decided to pursue my second degree in history that, I learned that it wasn't such common knowledge. And in fact, it's a topic that requires further investigation, particularly by scholars who focus on the diaspora outside of Greece. Wonderful work has been done and continues to be done, as Ioannis presented earlier, in Greece and for the Greek population and beyond Greece's borders. But the project that I'm going to present, looks at specifically the diaspora in the United States. And that project, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for you right now. That project, the Ottoman Greeks of the United States project, it's an archive in progress, basically. That's the way I place it and position it. It's basically a collection of resources that donors graciously have gifted to the University of Florida for the purposes of sharing with academics worldwide, for their own research purposes, and for raising awareness about the stories of these individuals, these immigrants who arrived to the United States from various regions of the former Ottoman Empire in the early 20th century. Okay, so first and foremost, the Ottoman Greeks of the U.S. project consists of the collections, right? And there's three components to the collections. There are three-dimensional artifacts, two-dimensional artifacts, and then interviews. And the first two are really the result of the third. After the interviews conclude, individuals who have all kinds of memorabilia, artifacts, objects, documents, in one way or another, have shared them with us, and we've been able to start a process of digitization and uploading to the digital collection of the University of Florida's libraries, which I'll show you in a minute. So first and foremost, the 3D artifacts. Okay, there are freestanding objects that individual families transferred from different regions of the former Ottoman Empire to the United States, some as immigrants, some as refugees. And there is that distinction that, our respondents, the individuals who participate, make clear or have made clear to us. There is that distinction between refugee and immigrant. So depending on what the time of arrival, the region of arrival, that identity is a layer that people add to the narrative about their families, and it's an important layer that we capture. So, for example, this three-dimensional artifact is a bronze flask that was donated by a respondent, Flora Turnidis, in Canton, Ohio. It was brought by her grandfather to Canton from northeastern Asia Minor and near the city of Ordu, which is on the coastline there of the Black Sea. And what we've been able to do using 3D digital technology is to capture that object in 3D format and then reconstitute it so anyone will be able to look at it and examine it for research purposes, include it perhaps in their research, and embellish their research using these types of objects. So if anyone is doing archaeological research, for example, this type of material would be helpful, would complement hopefully their research. In addition to the three-dimensional objects, the collection also has 2D artifacts, and that includes documents, it includes photographs, biographical statements, diaries, organizational charters and minutes from their meetings, postcards, and all kinds of other information that is in a written format of some kind. So the example two examples I'd actually like to highlight. One was donated by Vanthia Gatsinaris in outside of Los Angeles, California, who was a third generation immigrant from the islands of Marmara, donated to the project this wonderful document, which basically shows us a certificate granted by the society, the Marmarinon Society in Constantinople, to her grandfather for being a member, an ongoing member of the organization. So what we've been able to show, or what we're going to show in our upcoming research, in my upcoming research specifically, is these connection points, these networks between organizations in the former Ottoman Empire, and in some cases in Greece, in the United States. So for example, the Voithitikia Delphotis Avthoniaton, this organization existed as far as we know in Constantinople, and then had connections in New York and in Los Angeles, and also in the Northwest, in Seattle and in Portland. So an individual, and through the interviews, we found out that an individual would utilize this network to leave Marmara, and then they would be welcomed in New York City, and then they would be directed, to these other regions of the United States if they so wished, or if they had family members there, or people who were their kith and they knew of them, in Portland or Seattle or Los Angeles, let's say. So that's one important finding. In addition to that, photographs. This was donated by Nick Spondel again from Canton, Ohio. This is his grandfather, donning war garb. There are some studies about the resistance to the movement of Mustafa Kemal in northeastern Asia Minor, the region that is known as Pondos. And his grandfather was part of that resistance story. So he has this, photograph of his grandfather who partook in the guerrilla warfare that took place in northeastern Turkey. So that's an example of photographs. As it stands, between the three-dimensional objects and the two-dimensional objects, we have over 50,000 images that we are working on digitizing slowly with our student volunteers at the University of Connecticut, at the University of Florida. Yeah, Connecticut. At the University of Florida. My alma mater shines through, we have diligent, wonderful students at UF who are doing their best to help us digitize all of these photographs, all of these documents, so researchers can use them. I'll be using some of them as well for my own research, my dissertation, which is due next year, to be completed next year. So that is in short, the archival part of the collection. Then we have the interviews, and those are currently standing at approximately 254. And we have another 25 on queue, waiting individuals who want to participate and want to share their stories so that they can be used for research purposes. And basically in the interviews, we ask individuals anything and everything from the lives of their ancestors in the former Ottoman Empire, stories about migration or escape by expulsion, if they settled anywhere else before coming to the United States and what that experience was like, and then their experience during the travel, from one place to the other, and ultimately how they experienced entering the United States, settling in their respective areas in the US, and ultimately trying to document all of those experiences in terms of understanding things like their identity, understanding their network connections, their communities, how all of those were established. And I could say, from preliminary data that we have examined, that we see a variety of understandings of identity in the United States. Some that are linked to Greece and Greek identity very strongly, and some that are linked to Ottoman identity as well. There is a difference between those two, and I can't exactly speak to percentages at this point because we're still examining this data. But there's a variety of identities that people claim in their social circles and within their family units as well. So that's the interviews, and those are ongoing. Like I said, we have a section here in our website for individuals who are interested in being interviewed to contact us, to schedule an interview with us, and ultimately to help us document their family's story. Now, finally, the last component of this project is the utilization of the Ellis Island Archive to generate a migration map from the former Ottoman Empire to the United States. And currently we have posted on our website a sample of 100 individuals out of 3,500 that we've currently collected. And this is also an ongoing collection process. Currently this analysis is looking at heat mapping, and specifically looking at which cities in the former Ottoman Empire, specifically in the regions that are now part of the Turkish Republic, the majority or whatever frequency of immigrants immigrated to the United States. So we're looking at, density mapping here, density heat mapping. Anything that is yellow, represents a really high number, a really high population of immigrants that were born in those cities. And then tracing that migration to the United States, this is what you're looking at is the phase 1 outcome. So it's where people were born and where did they immigrate to. And in this phase 1, we see patterns that are in the historical record already. Historical scholarship has already noted that the majority of immigrants, arrived to the United States and settled and migrated to the Northeast, to the Midwest and the Northwest. So we know this, right? And what we also found out from this data, from the Ellis Island Ship Manifest data that is online, has been graciously provided for us by the Ellis Island Foundation, and it's available to the public, as Ioannis mentioned earlier. We find out that some immigrants, that went too far. Some immigrants settled in places that we wouldn't expect, like Oklahoma City or outside of Oklahoma City or St. Louis, which again is near the Midwest. But when the historical record looks at migration, they position the Midwest as the big city, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland. We don't think of like Iowa, or Northern Illinois. We don't think of Oklahoma and such places. So that's the importance of this type of data, right? It opens up our horizons and broadens our knowledge base. So we look at this type of data as a source of tracing and understanding and learning the non-conventional migrants, people who aren't included in the historical record. Where did they go? Is it one of the questions is the Northeast, the Midwest, and the Northwest the only places? And the answer is obviously no. And this data gives us the ability to say exactly where they migrated to, and then try to draw conclusions as to why and speculations as to why they migrated to where they're migrated. And the historical record helps us with that. But in some cases, you have individuals, like literally a single person going to Oklahoma. And the broader the data set becomes, the more of these patterns begin to emerge. And I can say that because I'm curating that data and I'm adding to it consistently. And every time a new place comes up, like in North Dakota, or in New Mexico or Arizona, and the historical record doesn't talk about these places, and yet people went there. They went there from Izmir, they went there from Smyrna, from Constantinople, from Trapezunda, from Sinasos, in the middle of Cappadocia. They migrated to these places, and their stories, for the most part, are silent. We really don't know about them. That's phase 1. In phase 2, what we're hoping to do is work in 2 directions. First, we are going to trace the ports of embarkation, and we're going to add that to this map. And we're also going to trace the ports of call. So if they stopped anywhere along the way, or they resided somewhere else before traveling to the United States, that will also be included in this map, making it possible to take the pathway of a single immigrant or a community and literally trace it through step by step, where they settled in the US. And then the second part of phase 2 is also accessing census records now and seeing what migration occurred within the US. So that's our next phase. So we're going to take, for example, a community of Alatsatiani in Somerville, Massachusetts, and we're going to see where they went to in the US, like Fort Worth, Texas, for example, or points west, Utah, California, Northern California. These areas are going to emerge from doing this phase 2 part of the study. So at the moment, I mentioned the sample size, 3,500. We're continuing to expand upon that. We've also drawn connections to the geography department at the University of Florida. So we're going to get UF students who are working on this already, this type of methodology. to get their hands on the data and, hopefully get the opportunity to process it for themselves and collaborate with the project for publication purposes, and, to bring light to this data and ultimately the stories of these individual immigrants and refugees. So with that said, if that is the entirety of my presentation, I will now yield to the next presenter. Again, I'd like to thank you for providing us with this opportunity to present.
It's super interesting. One thing I want to ask you, because I think people will ask, can someone just send you a digital copy of the photo, or do they have to send you the original?
Yes, this is a great question. So pre-COVID, we used to travel. I used to travel, and the plan was to actually take a couple of students with me this past year, so that they get their feet wet in interviewing individuals, and also going through the documentation process, and ultimately teaching them these methods, so that they become familiar with them for their own projects, or to remain as hopeful staff members in the future at the Ottoman Greeks of the U.S. project. So that was the process. The process is we would visit an individual's home or a community, and we would interview the individuals and then document everything at place. So nothing was taken from anyone. We did have some moments which make my hair stand on end when I say it, where some folks just gave us their documents or gave us objects. I have, for example, a couple of icons. I will always remember the individuals that decided that it was best for them to provide the actual objects. And every time it happened, I would say, are you sure you want to do this? You don't have to do this. These are your objects. And for those people, one of the answers would be, well, I have nobody else to give it to. There's nowhere else I can donate this. So take it, please. So, those are some exceptions. And I'm talking about, 5, 6, I can count them on 2 hands. So yeah, the convention for us is to, was to pre-COVID document on site. Post-COVID, we've come up with a new process. We've had to interview individuals via Zoom. In fact, this past May, all of our interviews were through digital Zoom software. And then we had to come up with a process by which individuals would digitize their own objects and provide them for us in that digital format in a photograph. And now we're there. Those photographs are now part of the curation process. So we're curating them as well, just as the rest of the objects and artifacts that we have.
Well, I'm sure that after today, many people are going to reach out to you. There's amazing material out there.
Yes, yeah, and that's one of the goals of the project is to capture, right? Is to make sure that we have this historical record. Because I know in my family, we have documents, we have photographs. I've already donated photographs to my family, into the project. And it needs to come into the hands of researchers who can draw the connections, create the patterns, triangulate the information, bring light to these experiences and raise awareness about this history, and put it in front of the general public and hopefully just increase awareness overall.
Thank you, George. Now